Good morning and welcome back. Students, let's continue with our yesterday's topic. Yesterday I told you what is a short story, its various definitions, how it differs from a novel, and what are its characteristics. Now today I'll tell you about the key elements of a short story. Although here also there is differences in opinion as various writers employ new techniques and include new elements for giving a concrete shape to their imagination. But the most essential and important elements of the short story are setting, plot, character, point of view, theme, and dialogue. Besides these, there are other elements also like exposition and climax, etc. But here I am going to discuss the 6 key elements of a short story. Number 1 is setting. This means the time when the story occurs and the place where it occurs. So it provides a kind of background to the story. Next is plot. Plot is the most important element of a short story. The plot is what happens in the story, the incidents. Or in other words, yes, we can say that the events of the story and the sequence in which they are told constitute the plot of the story. A good plot always produces conflict for the sake of excitement and to keep the reader involved. Now, this conflict can be of different types, like that of a person against self, then a person against nature, that is, forces of nature. It can be a conflict between two characters, that is, person against person, and also of person against society. Then another important key element is character. Characterization and character development is very important feature of a short story. Usually in short stories, flat or simple characters are introduced and generally the story revolves around one single character only. Next important aspect is point of view. Every writer has something to say when he sits down to write, and this something is his point of view, his philosophy or criticism of life. He interprets life according to his ability and expresses his point in his story either through first person or second person or sometime third person. Then comes the theme. Now, theme is the soul of the story. It's the abstract ingredient. We can say that theme is the main idea or central insight into life that exists in the story. It may occur as a moral, a lesson, a human value, quality, or a truth. In a way, it is like the foundation on which the structure of story takes shape with the help of characters in action against a setting. And finally comes language, or we can say dialogue. Brevity is essential. It should be to the point and brief and helps in understanding the character of an individual, the protagonist. So in this way, a story is an artistic sum total of plot, setting, character, theme, point of view, and dialogue. Students, further I would like to tell you about the types of short stories. Short stories are of different types, just like a novel. These are like action stories, adventure stories, biography, comedy, crime, detective, drama, dystopia, fable, fantasy, history, horror, mystery, philosophy, politics, romance, satire. Then there can be science fiction, supernatural stories are there, thrillers are there, and also tragedy or tragic stories. Next, I would like to tell you about some literary styles or movements with examples of authors and the period in which they exist or they wrote. Number one is Gothic fiction. These stories explore human psychology. They deals with themes of fear, death, and imagination by incorporating mystery, horror, suspense, or supernatural elements. And the famous writers of such stories are Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the period in which they wrote is from 1830s to 1850s. Then realism. They represent the subject matter in a detailed and realistic way. Realistic stories represent subject matter in a detailed and realistic way that feels true to life. For example, the writers are Kate Chopin, O. Henry, and Anton Chekhov, and they belong to the period between 1850 to early 1900s. Then modernism. Experimenting with narrative form, style, and chronology using techniques like inner monologues and stream of consciousness to capture the experience of the individual. So, here the action develops internally into the psyche of the characters, and the writers of this kind of stories includes James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Catherine Mansfield, and the period in which they wrote is from 1910 to 1920s. Then we have science fiction, presenting imagined futures or dystopian worlds in which humans face profound technological, social, or environmental changes. For example, the authors are Ray Bradbury from 1940s to 1950s. Then another movement is of magical realism, combining realistic narrative or setting with elements of surrealism, dreams, or fantasy. Example of this kind of writer is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and the period is in which he wrote starts from 1960s and lasts till 1970s. Then postmodernism, using fragmentation, paradox, or unreliable narrators to explore the relationship between the author, reader, and the text. And the authors are Donald Barthelme, George Louis Borges, and Julio Cortázar. And the period is from 1950s to 1970s. So students, I hope that now this topic is clear to you. But before leaving, I want to tell you that keep studying. Read your textbooks, the short stories, novels, etc., which are prescribed in your syllabus, so that when we discuss any topic, it will be easier for you to follow and understand. Thank you.